Welcome to the Cyber Talent series, where we explore how organizations are closing skills gaps, accelerating onboarding, and building high-performance cybersecurity teams. My name is Phoebe DeVito. I'm joined by my co-host, Thomas Rogers, and today we are talking with Rob Fuller, Vice President in a cybersecurity role. Rob, we're so grateful to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So to kick it off, do you mind just telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
I participate in cyber collegiate defense competition, CCDC for colleges. I have a startup that does training and things for Black Hat and other corporate events. Like you said, I'm a vice president at a Fortune 500. I just actually recently finished my CISM. I'm working towards being a CISO. I just got invited into the Carnegie Mellon CISO program. I have 3 degrees. I have a bunch of certs. I help and participate as an advisor for MetaCTF, Skillbit, and United States Marine.
That's awesome. Super comprehensive, Thomas. You look like you had something there.
Yeah, I mean, hard to narrow down and hone into one specific area of expertise. But one thing we talk about all the time is within your professional roles and your career, you've done a lot of hiring, interviewing, mentoring, whether as a part of your actual job or kind of on the side, like you mentioned the CCDC stuff. Would love for you to share just a little bit about your philosophy around interviewing. I think interviewing is an art in some ways, and also just, something you can build experience on. I do think a lot of the professionals that I talk to that move into people manager roles for the first time, they're not quite sure how to do it well. So if you could shed any light, just experience that you've gained through the years of what works, what doesn't work, that kind of thing.
So as the interviewer, one of the hardest things to get out of people, I mean, you can ask technical questions. There's the default, what port does Telnet run on? The trick question of what port is ICMP? There's all these trick questions that you can kind of understand a little bit of the technical insight. For me, as interviewing specifically for red teamers, but this applies outside of it, I feel like you have to have a rubric. And what that means is I ask in my interviews 8 questions. It's been the same 8 questions for 10 years, 20 years, somewhere on there. And the cool thing is that the same 8 questions, even though the technology has changed, even though the skill sets have changed, even though the roles that I'm interviewing for are changing. And the reason why that works is because it's a point system that goes on how well you know these different things and how you respond. And you can get enough points in different sections to get there. The super important thing about making a rubric, making a point system for your interviews and not being super subjective and just be like, I like them more, or I remember that I like them more, is when you get down to having to fight for the person that you want. As an example, I was in a situation where there was an individual who scored really well on my rubric, but they did not have a master's degree. They didn't have, I think, 6 years of experience when the requirement was 4, but it was recommended 6. And they did really well. And our HR partners and our recruiting team was like, hey, why didn't you pick so-and-so and so-and-so? This person has a PhD. This person has a master's and 10 years of experience. Why am I going to pay for this person who has none of those things? And when I go in front of them and show them, well, this is the point score, this is how they did, they're flabbergasted. They asked for a copy of it. I'm like, nope, I'm good. The cool thing about that is I go with receipts, as you would say, right? And instead of, I like this person more because. And so interviewing someone, you got to figure out what your questions are and keep them very broad. But for the specific types of roles, you want to really have those questions in mind. And then it's repeatable. Then it's so easy to say, well, the 17 people I interviewed, not one of them got a score in this box, and I really need this box. And so we need to look for more. And that's important because you'll have HR partners or people who are trying to hit their metrics with the recruiting and say, hey, well, you've had this rec out for 6 months. We're going to close it off. Well, give me better people because this is what I'm looking for and you're not filling that role. So you have to be systematic in your questions and you have to be systematic in your setup, or it's just a bad game of, do I like this person's face better? And I honestly, that's what it comes down to me. And that's one of the things I hated when I first started interviewing people was after the interview, initially, I was on board interviews and stuff like that. It'd be like, so what do you think of this person? Well, I thought this person that and that person that. I'm like, okay. And then the next person comes along and it's skewed differently based on what the last person was like. And I hated that. I can't even imagine if I knew that was happening to me. I'm like, can I just interview last or first? And instead, it's just a broken setup.
I think there's like these studies about psychologically, like in movies where like the first character you see, you're rooting for that person. I feel like
Yeah.
there's something similar in interviews.
Yeah. I mean, usually the first person that you interview is someone who's been recommended. Like that's why our entire industry or even at large, people generally who get recommended get in the door and get the job because they probably hit that.
What did it take for you to get to the point where you had the rubric that you felt good about? Because I imagine you like probably made some mistakes early on.
Well, first off, I was doing the interviews and was really subjective, and just this is a character flaw in myself. When I see something that is inefficient, I will hyper focus and fix it. So I took probably 2 months of not doing a lot of actual work and trying to get this thing fixed, and I built it. And I've done a few tweaks over the years, but I wouldn't say any specific mistakes in it. But that's a good question. I guess the mistakes I would say is sometimes someone would talk about a specific subject or a specific answer, and I wouldn't have a point score, and I would add it in the wrong spot and maybe had to move it up or down based on my own subjectivity and biases. That everyone should know these things. But my mistake would be that initially the rubric was heavily weighted towards what I expect people to know.
Yeah. So mistake one is not having a rubric. Mistake two is like misweighting different parts of the rubric, and then you just refine it over time. So it still is like you get reps. And then you also see people on the job and you're like, okay, that person, that was a good hire. How did they cross-referencing like what the rubric actually had them at? I don't think I've asked you this question before, but I'm curious because you mentioned like the data-driven approach where like HR comes to you and says like, this is a perfect candidate on paper. You're able to defend it based on the data you have. Have you applied that to like actually creating job recs? Because I assume at certain points in your career, there's probably times where people are like, do we really need to hire a new role? Like, do we really need to create a new role? Or maybe not. But yeah, curious if you've used kind of a similar approach to like actually fight to, like get a job posting in the first place.
So getting job postings is a very different beast than hiring. That's usually something that even as a VP, I have very little control over. I can fight for job postings, but at the end of the day, it's an org decision that is sometimes based on finance, based on who looks like they need the most people. So at the end of the day, the thing that I would express on that particular point, but to get the positions, you have to be okay with showing failure. And that's something that a lot of people have a hard time with. And that is the only way that you can guarantee that people are going to be sent your way, or your leadership is going to send people your way. It's like, hey, I'm underwater. Like, I can't get all of this stuff done that you've asked me to. These 7 people that I have under me can't get it done either. Like, we're not hitting our metrics over and over and over again. The problem is you have to be trusted that you're doing a good job, or at least trying. And so politically, you have to have good trust that you're trying to hit those marks and just failing at it. And the problem that we have in cybersecurity is that and many people in all kinds of industries, they don't want to leave something unfinished. So they get it done anyways. And they sacrifice home and family and other things to get the job done, which is a valuable trait when it's actually needed. Like when stuff is hitting the fan and it's go or like make or break time, sure. Like, I understand that, but when you're spending 16-hour days on reports and metrics, like meetings that don't need to be meetings, like that's when you're failing. So that, to answer your question, again, long-winded, but the thing is, you got to be okay with failing to get those roles posted.
I love that. I never would have expected you to go that direct. Like, it's like vulnerability, but like warranted vulnerability and like earning the trust to display that. That's super cool. So I think one of the things about cybersecurity that's really interesting and unique is there are a lot of ways to like quantify capabilities or skills. It's not perfect, obviously, but in an interview process, it's not holistic, because if you only focus on, a person's capabilities or skills or knowledge, you could be missing a lot of other stuff that's really important to like, are they a good team player? Are they a good cultural fit? Are they a good problem solver? But I'm curious, do you agree that cybersecurity is uniquely a field where skills and capabilities are more quantifiable than others?
I would say that no. I mean, I think that in many fields, you have a easy way to quantify skill set and capability. Some of it's a lot more defined even than cybersecurity. Like, we have certifications that kind of go along that route. But as far as like, I don't know, like the 8 questions I have actually do a really good job at quantifying both curiosity, which is something that is very needed in cybersecurity, technical skill set, as well as your ability to kind of think outside the box and be a team player. But I would say that my particular interviews are generally technical and curiosity, and out of the box thinking, whereas I tend to have my team interview for team fit. I know that is not okay in many HR fields. Like, you should never interview someone who's above you. You should never interview someone who's like your same peer, like all of these faux pas. But honestly, like, I think that if you don't meet the people you're going to be working with, that is a huge problem. And I tend to ask for forgiveness when I do that, because I really need the attitudes, the personalities to all jive. And if they interview and it's, a big red flag that like there was an argument during, I've actually had an argument during an interview. Yeah. I don't care how good you are technically, like, it's done.
So it's funny you say that. I have been in a position where we interviewed with all the peers that are going to be on your team and agree. Like, I can recognize the limitations, and I think it did lead to a lot of team cohesion and helped us, maybe dodge a couple bullets. And so one thing I'm curious about, going back to kind of the psychology of it, another psychology that I noticed myself in those situations sometimes falling victim to is just that kind of like group think. And that was because in this particular situation, we would do a little bit of like a round robin debrief. So I'm curious, like, how teams can strike that balance, if you are in a position where you are going to be interviewing with a team and they're disseminating that information back to you. Like, do you do that in kind of a group meeting, one-on-one? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how you can kind of avoid some of those psychological pitfalls.
Yeah, I know this is going to be posted, and someone's from my team's probably going to hear this. So I apologize ahead of time. And if you hear this, we can talk. But I tend to just listen to how individually they talk about the person. And kind of ignore some of their decisions about the person. And so someone can be saying, yeah, they're not super technical, but like they were kind of fun, they were interesting, and then they, not specifically those words, but like when you're talking about someone that you interviewed, you can get a vibe on how that person did in the interview, even if they're technically didn't succeed, right? And so I tend to talk to people one-on-one about that just so I can get their honest feedback. But I also think that groupthink in particular cases is good, just because if everyone's kind of jiving along the same lines, you know what? I'll take that back. I think that sometimes, normally I do just have people all talk to me after they've all talked themselves, like reviewed afterwards. And I don't know what the better option is. I think that there are probably people that I'm leaving out of the conversation that had an opinion but didn't feel comfortable saying it in the group, and I probably am just missing out on that. I'll do better.
I think too, like, you're really inspiring me with the rubric idea, because I think that could even be a solution. The times when I did go into those conversations and I had even taken notes, it was a lot easier to stay authentic to my initial reaction, and sometimes kind of interesting. I think there is a value in saying like, well, I kind of read them this way, but now that you say that, maybe it was because I was the last interviewer. And it's great to hear that other people didn't have that experience. So yeah, I think there's room for all of it. And, there's like humanness in all of it. So
bring the receipts. Yeah,
bring the receipts.
Rob, I'm curious your thoughts on how AI has changed interviewing. Like, has it changed it for you?
This is anger coming. I find interviewing, so as an interviewer, I think that AI can help build interesting questions for you to ask. I personally don't want to ever have AI in the room as it's happening, either side of it, because I think that removes the personhood of it. I have had people that I interview absolutely reading from what the output is of an AI. I have very small bits of training in reading prompters for Hack 5, and I'm okay at it. It takes a lot of skill and practice to be good at reading a prompt and speaking naturally. But it is very obvious if you are reading from an AI prompt when you're doing an interview, either side of the fence, right? It's an immediate turnoff for me because it's no longer me interviewing you, it's me interviewing ChatGPT. And that's just not like, I'm not hiring them, I'm hiring you. And so, unfortunately, as it is right now, I'm sure that opinions or actions will change as we grow through this technology. But if I can tell that you're using AI, I'm not going to hire you, period. Like, it's just not an option because you didn't trust yourself. You didn't know enough or think you know enough to come into it. Honestly, I think that if you don't come in as your authentic self, you're already one step behind.
Awesome. I love that. So, transitioning from hiring and interviewing into managing teams, one thing that has come up with a handful of our guests on this podcast is just the mindset shifts that happen when you're moving from an individual contributor role into a manager role. And so, I'm curious if there's anything specific when you reflect back on that journey for you that were key learnings along the way, or advice you would give to someone who's trying to transition into a leadership role.
Yeah. My one career regret and biggest regret was, and I'm going to take you down a little bit of a story, but while I worked at General Electric, I had an amazing opportunity. My boss was leaving. I was a senior red teamer at the time, along with one other senior red teamer. And my boss was like, one of you two is going to take my role. We're looking internally only, really. So let us know if you're interested in doing that. I'm not exactly sure how fast my peer said yes, but I was really quick to, nope, I'm good. I was like, I really enjoy being on keyboard. I don't want to do all that managerial stuff. I have no experience in it. And so they almost immediately went for obviously the only one who was applying from the role internally, at least. And the reason why it's a regret is because that night I went home and my wife, who knows everything, I was like, yeah, my boss, Craig, he's moving on, but they were going to hire internally. And I said no, because I don't have the experience to be there. I want to be a good leader. And she's like, what do you mean you don't have the experience? And I'm like, oh, I mean, I've never been a manager. And she basically slaps me upside the head and it's like, okay, you were in the Marine Corps for 8 years. Did you not lead anyone there? I'm like, yeah. You built Nova Hackers from scratch. You've always complaining about how many of them you have to handle. There's like 900 people there. So you didn't lead any of them. Yeah. And she starts off naming all of these other things like CCDC and so on. So what you're telling me is that you have the leadership experience, but you just don't think you do for some reason. And I was like, yeah. And then honestly, that team was like a family to me. I still talk to them to this day, and so many of them. And GE was a great experience. And I think that my peer Dale, he's awesome at his job, and I would love to have seen how that would have shaken out. But man, not going for that role was a gut check. And the reason why it was a gut check is because it became infinitely harder to try and transition from an individual contributor after that, because I didn't have the experience. And everywhere I looked for jobs in leadership after that, they were like, hey, we need at least 5 years of managerial experience. I'm like, I don't have it on paper, but I have these things that my wife told me about. And it was never good enough until another person gave me a chance. And unfortunately, that was luck, not me doing it. Well, I mean, I did the effort to build my network and friend group enough to get that opportunity. So I did do the work in there. I'm not taking that completely for granted, but yeah. So I would say my biggest offer up for people looking to transition from individual contributor to leader is take the leap, take the chance. Anytime someone says, hey, try this leadership thing, do it. Take that experience. Also listen to your spouse. They know better.
I feel like everyone we've talked to has been in some sort of leadership role in InfoSec, and everyone has expressed some sort of pain in that transition, whether it's I did it too late, or maybe some people even be like, I miss it. I miss the individual stuff. I appreciate the managerial side and the responsibility that comes with that, but it was a tough decision no matter what.
See, I want to fight you back a little bit on the I miss it part. I hear that a lot from managers, and I have never once in my life needed my job to give me something to do. I do CCDC. I do all this stuff outside of my job. I'm hands-on I have a lab that you can't see that is 25 servers, right? And if you look at my GitHub, I have been coding a freaking storm in the last month. And I hate that cop out. I really do. Because you can absolutely be hands-on keyboard, even though you're a manager. Sorry.
I feel like it's like me saying I used to live in Chicago and being like, oh, and it's December. Oh, I miss Chicago. And it's like, if I was in Chicago right now, it'd be like 5 degrees. It's like, I don't actually miss it.
You miss parts of it.
Yeah, exactly. So I was going to ask, because you mentioned all the side hustle stuff you do, and not even side hustle, but like stuff you do for the community. You do so much. I'm curious how you've applied that stuff to your actual job, like how you apply what you've learned there in management or mentorship, stuff like that.
That's a good question. So I will say that CCDC, just going back to that again, is hands down the place that I learned the most stuff about red teaming. 1,000,000%. Because one of the things about CCDC is you have to be invisible to blue teamers who are staring at the screen that whole weekend. And if I can be invisible to someone staring at the screen, I can be invisible to a SOC any day, an enterprise SOC any day. And like that was the challenge I needed to really hone my skills on the red teaming side. Leadership side, volunteering. So I'm actually helping with a GMU, George Mason University team doing a cohort like end of year thing. I can't remember the name of it, but working with and volunteering with ShmooCon, doing and working with Nova Hackers, like all of this other stuff really has you doing the people side of things and handling people. So outside of the paperwork for HR stuff, enterprise-wise, like I can pretty much handle any situation. It also gives you empathy. That's one of the big things. When you are volunteering where you have zero authority to push something onto someone, you really have to figure out what's driving them, why they're doing the thing that they're doing, and how to get them to do the thing that you need them to do without any authority at all. And so when you can do that with a little bit of authority, once you're a manager or senior manager, and a little bit more as a director and a VP, you wield that knife a lot softer and a lot easier when you have the experience and know that, everyone's, for the most part, everyone's trying to do a good job. They might just not have all the information, or they have something else going on in their lives that you gotta have handle and understand. So to get back to your question, all of this stuff, anything that I do outside of work, just intermingles with all of the other stuff. There really is no discernible line in between them.
So one other sort of side quest, if anyone's questioning like how much other stuff you do, that you didn't mention, but you posted about yesterday, is Silicon Valley. So advising that show, did that experience help you in any ways? Or was it just kind of a fun thing you did?
It made me remember how much I hate shift work. And so I actually helped design some of the set stuff too for the automated refrigerator. And I coded all of that up while I was at ShmooCon getting ready for a talk because they needed it because they were recording that day. Like,
that's incredible.
So I will say that, like, just to answer your question, I hate shift work. I don't want to ever do that again. I've done my dues there. I'm good.
Awesome. All right. Well, one last question, Rob, that we ask all of our guests who come on, another kind of big one. But if you were starting your career in cyber now, what is one thing that you would tell yourself?
If I was getting into cyber right now, what would I tell myself? I would say drop the ego way faster than I did. I came into cybersecurity in 2005. I thought I was the hottest thing since sliced bread. I thought I knew everything. And I broke some trust and I broke some friendships because I did stuff like that. And yeah, I would grow up a little faster.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Awesome. Well, Rob, thank you so much for coming on. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to share that we didn't get to?
Yeah. I would say, just if you're listening to this, reach out to people. Cybersecurity folks are pretty awesome. There are some bad eggs, but very few. We all like to learn. So if you are struggling at getting a job, if you're struggling at finding roles and opportunities, this network, this small group of cybersecurity folks on this planet are all pretty awesome people in general. Like I would say 80-90% of the folks in cybersecurity are pretty awesome. So connect to someone on LinkedIn, say, hey, looks like you work here. I'm new to cybersecurity. Any suggestions? And like they will probably respond if you're nice about it and do a little research. So that was what I'd say is make friends.
Awesome. Love that. Thank you so much, Rob. Thanks again for your time here.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Rob. That's a wrap for today's episode of the Cyber Talent Series. If you enjoyed the combo, make sure to subscribe on Spotify. Also follow us on YouTube and subscribe there. We'll be sharing content there as well. For ongoing tips on hiring, retaining, upskilling your cyber workforce, make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and check us out at metactf.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.